There's nobody here apparently. I just said something and there was no response at all.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Happy Mother's Day to you too. There we go. Found them. Somebody stole the audience. You guys doing okay? I hope so. Oh, a quick announcement before I get started. Most of you have probably heard, if you've been here at all, that we're getting ready to start a Spanish venue coming up in August-ish time frame as soon as we get everything put together for it. Apparently, it's getting out. We had a person show up last week for our Spanish venue, which we don't currently have. So, but anyway, so one of the things that we need a couple more, at least one more, fluent Spanish speaker to be on my teaching team so that we can be accounting for that as we're preparing the sermon. And then the plan is that we're going to start an English service on Thursday night where I'll preach the message to whoever shows for that service, and that'll give the Spanish speakers on my team from Thursday to Sunday to get it translated so one of them can then present it. You don't have to be the one who presents it to be on the team, because we've got a teaching team and we only have like 3 speakers here. So it's not like if you're saying I'll be on the teaching team, that means you're up here, but it does mean you're helping with the sermons. And so anyway, I got one email already after first service to somebody who wants to be part of the team. And so if you're fluent in Spanish and would like to be either part of the planning team for the service or the teaching team, or you're not fluent in Spanish, you want to be part of the planning the service, just let us know. Just email me, steve@spoutsprings.org. We'll get that moving. Anybody ever get in a mess because you made a bad decision? I'll take that as everybody. Yeah, we all have this thing where we make good decisions and we make bad decisions. And we saw at the beginning of this series on Future Focus, we saw that your life is made up of the decisions that you make. Your life is basically the sum total of your decisions. And so today we're going to talk not about big decisions, because a lot of times we like to talk about, how do I make this huge decision? I've got to decide on a career path. I've got to decide on making a big move. I've got this huge thing happen in my life. What about just the day-to-day living well? How do you do that? And we're going to be looking, of course, in the book of Proverbs. Basically, if you're going to subtitle Proverbs, Proverbs is good decisions for idiots. Okay, Idiot's Guide to Good Decisions is the book of Proverbs. It's just basically, okay, here's a good decision, here's a good decision, here's a really bad decision, here's a good decision. That's the whole book is all these poetic things that say, okay, here's a bad decision, but here's a better alternative. Okay? And we're going to be in Proverbs 3, and I just want to start because in the very middle of that chapter, it kind of unveils the rewards for making good decisions. It says, if you make good decisions, your life's going to look like this. And it starts, I'm going to start in verse 13 of Proverbs 3. And verse 13, it starts off and it says, joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. Joyful, that's a good word to start something, isn't it? Joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. For wisdom is more profitable than silver, profitable than silver, and her wages are better than gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Now listen to this. She offers you long life in her right hand and riches and honor in her left. Long life in one hand, riches and honor in the other hand. That's a nice set of handfuls, right? So that's the promise. And riches and honor in her left. She will guide you down delightful paths. Delightful, that's a delightful word. All her ways are satisfying. That's another really good word. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly. So this is what it's saying, if you choose to live your life according to godly wisdom, there are really, really good results from doing that on a regular basis, making good, wise, godly, biblical, whatever phrase you want to put here, decisions. Incredible rewards for that. Now, before we dig into them, though, because the first part of this chapter basically just outlines. If you do this, this is what happens. I need to let you know one thing about Proverbs. Because a lot of people can mess up how they read the book of Proverbs. But understand something very important about the book of Proverbs. Proverbs are not promises. They're probabilities. When you go to the book of Proverbs, you're reading through these things, they're not promises, they're probabilities. One of the most famous Proverbs that Christians just love is raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And we look at that and go, cool, and a lot of parents are like, I'm going to do that. And it's good. It's a really good idea. But a probability, not a promise. How do I know that? Because do you know anybody who seemed like a really, really good set of parents? They did just everything right, and one of their kids or two of their kids just completely went off the rails? All the way down, they just jumped on the stupid roller coaster and rode it to the end. I mean, they're just, you know people like that, right? Where you can't see anything the parents, matter of fact, they raised 4 kids, and 3 of them are brilliant, wonderful, loving people, and one of them is like, they were adopted or something because they don't fit, right? And you also know, matter of fact, a lot of you are in this category where your parents didn't quite do a good job. Right? There's a lot, because of our community, there's a lot of you, and some people join the military to get away from bad parenting. I mean, that's a fact, okay? And some people end up going through the system, so you had really screwed up parents, and you turned out really, really well. And if it's not you, you know people who you look at your parents and go, I've got one friend who says she was raised by wolves. And she turned out pretty good, all things considered, you know? And it's like, so it's a probability, not a promise. If you do things the way God describes them, generally speaking, things are going to work out well for you. It's sort of like if you're going to make a living as a gambler, you're not going to make a living as a gambler doing lots of long shots. You're going to make a living as a gambler making good, safe bets and accumulating. And that's basically what that's saying. When a proverb is just, here are the safe bets in life. If you want your life to turn out pretty well, you follow these things, and the natural result of that cumulative decision-making, cumulative wise decisions, is what we just saw as all those wonderful things. It's not one great decision, it's that series of cumulative good decisions over your lifetime will give you great results, okay? So what are those kind of decisions? And what we're going to look in the first few verses of this chapter of Proverbs, and each of us is going to point and give us a question to ask ourselves about how am I doing in living my life with wisdom, okay? And let's go back to chapter 3, verse 1. It starts out and says, my child, never forget the things I've taught you. Store my commands in your heart. If you do these, you will live many years and your life will be satisfying. Your probability of you having a successful life is dependent on not forgetting the things God taught you and storing God's commands. In other words, here's my question. Am I reflecting God's principles? Is my life reflecting God's principles? And I teach this pretty frequently. Let me give you a couple other verses that report that. Psalm 37 says, the instructions of his God, talking about a righteous person, the instructions of his God is in his heart. His steps do not falter. Straight steps. That's a good thing. Another one in, what's that one? This is also Psalm 119. Says, I have stored up God's word in my heart that I might not sin against him. And this, if you think about it, I use this illustration all the time, but this is one of the most important truths that I teach. I teach a lot of things. This is one of the most important things. If you could just grab this one, this will help you so much. Art always reflects the artist. If I come along and I see an art gallery and I go in there and every painting is somebody crying, or every painting is catastrophe and doom and gloom. And what do I know about that artist? Yeah, they're depressed, they're discouraged, they're at least an insane pessimist because their art reflects what's in their heart, okay? Now, if I go to the next gallery over and it's all rainbows and unicorns and cotton candy, what do I know about that person? They're in denial, that's right. Okay? So the art always reflects the artist. Well, the universe was created by God. In the beginning, God created it. The universe, one way to view the universe, it is God's masterpiece of art. And that is going to reflect the artist. And what that means is, one of the key things that means is that it reflects him. The universe reflects God. God's creation is going to reflect his nature and his principles. God's creation reflects his nature and his principles. And how that plays out one way is that, I'm going to put that next one there. Living in harmony with God's principles puts you in harmony with his creation. See, this is common sense stuff. You don't even have to be a Christian for this to work for you. You can be somebody who rejects God completely, but if you live in harmony with what we all, you can go, every culture has the same basic set of rules that reflect God's principles. value people, stuff like that. And if you live in harmony with God's universe, you'll live in harmony with his principles, and your life will be better for it. I mean, this is, when you stop and think about it, you're going to go, oh yeah. Because do you know any, I mean, when I graduated from high school back, in the Stone Age, I went to my 5-year reunion. And I don't know if you understand something about 5 years. 5 years out of high school is about how long it takes for living against God's standards and principles to really start showing. 18, you really can't see it at 18. You don't see what's going on. But by the time you get them 22, 23, living against God's principles, it starts showing up. And by the time I go to my fifth high school reunion, I walk into the place, I'm like, as a matter of fact, I drove past it once. It was at this park, and I drove past it, and I can't find the kids I went to high school with. And finally I realized that group of old fat people, they're the ones I went to high school with. Okay? Because that's about how long it takes. If you just stop and think in your life of people you know who've lived blatantly against God's principles, what do they look like? How long do they live? There's just, as you live in harmony with God's principles, you'll live in harmony with his creation, because his creation reflects his principles. And your life will be better, longer, happier, as a general rule, if you choose to live there. I'm not saying stuff doesn't go wrong, but I'm saying as a general rule, if you find somebody who looks way older than they should be, than they are, I will almost guarantee you, unless something, some sort of a disease happened, they've been living opposed to God's principles for their life. Matter of fact, I've always thought if you find a teenage girl and she wants to start smoking, the best cure is to show her a girl who's 5 years older than she is, who's been smoking. Okay, that was free. I get a lot of free stuff today, just in case you're curious. Okay? So, am I reflecting God's principles? Let's go to the next little section. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Loyalty and kindness. Write them deep within your heart. Then you'll find favor with both God and people. And you will earn a good reputation. You've heard this verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Or he'll show you the path straight. He'll make your path straight. Okay? What's the question? Am I moving in faith? Am I moving my life in faith? Now, do you know what the opposite of faith is? Control. Now, you wanted to say doubt. The opposite of faith is doubt. That's not true, because faith requires doubt. If there's no doubt, what you have is not faith, but certainty. Okay? If you have faith, there has to be doubt. So the opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is control. Because if I'm trusting God, that means I don't have to be in control. But because faith is not my specialty, I love to be in control. Have you ever met anybody who says they're not a control freak? You have that conversation with somebody and they go, oh, well, I'm kind of a control freak. I'm like, yeah, well, that's just genetic right there. Because the opposite of faith is control. None of us have faith coming naturally, so all of us want to be in control. We want to make sure things are going our way. And one of the things that happens with us is when I start talking about faith and living by faith, most people immediately go to big stuff. Oh, I'm going to live by faith, and I'm going to go to Kenya and start an orphanage. I'm going to live by faith, and I'm going to do this spectacular big thing. Really, you know what the hardest part of living by faith is? The hardest part of faith is not the big stuff. This morning I got up and I'm journaling through the book of Ephesians. I'm in Ephesians 4. And it come across a passage that I know really, 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 really well. Matter of fact, it's a passage that I teach on a lot. I put it in one of my books. I'll put it in the next book. I just love this passage in Ephesians where it says to take off what is bad and put on what's good. It's really simple. And it's the key to so much of Christianity is when there's something bad that you're doing that's in your life, you stop doing that and you start doing a replacement that's good. And I love to teach that. I hate to live it. Because as I'm going through it this morning, you know, how God can be, I don't know if you know this, when you're reading your Bible, especially if you're journaling, God will be insanely annoying. You know God's one of his characteristics is he's annoying? He is. God's very annoying. And so you're reading the Bible, and there's something that can sort of apply to you, but could apply to other people even better, and God will only point out the stuff that applies to you. So it's like, okay, take off the bad, put on the good, and sort of in my head I'm going, you know how negative your thoughts have been recently? Well, yeah, but things have been bad, isn't it? What, take off what? Take off negative thinking. Replace it with what? Positive stuff. Ding, 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 congratulations, you're the winner. But I don't want to. I like sort of once in a while just wallowing around in the negative. You know what I'm saying? I like to just focus on that for a little bit and let that kind of feed and just enjoy feeling. Anybody else enjoy feeling sorry for yourself once in a while? Just put that in there and faith is best exemplified not by doing something spectacular. It's when you come across something little like that and saying, okay, God wants me to put away the negative thoughts and embrace positive thoughts. And I'm going to do it today. That's the hardest part of trust. That's the biggest challenge for faith, because the opposite of faith is control, and I want to control myself, and instead of giving it over to God and saying, okay, God, I am going to take this negative behavior of mine, and I'm going to stop it, I'm going to replace it with something positive. And just the day-to-day little decisions reflecting God's principles in those little decisions is a big act of faith that is huge for us to become who God wants us to be. Now, a part of that whole living by faith thing, is going to be living through trials and problems. Do you know the difference? By the way, this is free. Got a lot of free stuff today. Today's like bonus day. There's all kinds of free stuff. You know the difference between a trial and a temptation? A temptation is when you want to do something bad, but shouldn't. A trial is when you want to quit because things are going bad. Okay? And your tendency when you're tempted is to embrace the temptation. Get as close to it as possible. Here's something bad. This will be bad right now, represent something bad. And I see it in my life, and what do I want to do with this bad thing? I want to get just as close as I can. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to touch it, but I want to get just as... Because a temptation, you're drawn toward something bad. A trial, you want to run away. Something's bad in your life and you want to quit. You're looking for the escape door. You're just walking around your life looking for the escape hatch. How do I get out of this bad thing in my life? How do I make this stop? That's a trial. And faith is letting God work you through the trials. There's a couple verses in Proverbs 3 we've been reading. We kind of skipped over verses 11 and 12. And it says, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." Now, it's interesting because those two verses get quoted in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And as soon as the guy quotes these two verses in Hebrews, he comes back with this. He says, "Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children." Yeah, show faith when life stinks. For what children are not disciplined by their father? And the next verse down it says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." You're going through something crappy. What do you need to do? Just keep on trucking. Just keep on moving through it. That is one of the biggest things of faith you can do, is if you're going through a trial and you get a shortcut out of the trial, the biggest thing of faith is staying in the trial when there's an exit. That's huge. That's so hard to do. Isn't that hard? That is so hard to do. But that's faith. That's trusting God that God is working through this bad thing in my life and that he's going to produce what he wants to produce in my life. By the way, this is another free bonus content thing. Have you heard about snowplow parents? Now, you've heard of helicopter parents, right? The ones that just hover over their kids all the time. Well, there's a new designation for a lot of parents now called snowplow parents. And snowplow parents just barge ahead of their kids, taking out all the obstacles. If a teacher tries to give them a bad grade, the parent's going to come rushing in and get the grade changed. If they just go through and they just plow all the problems out of their children's path. Think about that for just a second. If God builds our character through trials, and you take away all your child's trials, you're going to get a child who either is a character or has no character. Right? That's what's going to happen. If you don't here's how I've been saying this way for years. Because kids are curious, kids are stubborn, and kids are stupid. Okay? Yeah, I meant you. If you're a kid here, yeah, it's true. Okay? And sometimes the only thing you can do with a kid is let them touch the iron to see that it's hot. Right? You can, it's hot. Don't touch the, don't. Oh, go ahead. Good parenting consists of sometimes letting them touch the iron, just making sure they don't touch it with their tongue. Try to keep the consequences to a manageable amount there. But you let them have the repercussions, the consequences of their actions. It is crucial that your children learn that when they do stupid things, bad things happen. Because if you turn somebody loose who's 18 on the world and they've never had anything bad happen because you've been preventing it, God help us all. Okay? I'm going to throw something else. This is totally, that was free. This is freer. Okay? I'm going to confess something. Because we talked about the Spanish venue we're getting ready to do. And to do that, to make room for it, we had to take our 2 classes for like preteens, 5th, 6th grade, something like that. The one on Sunday morning and one on Sunday night, we had to combine them and put them on Sunday night. I'm ecstatic about it. I really am. Because I've got this philosophy on raising kids. And that is about the time they're about 5th grade, let's be honest. Your 5th grader, 6th grader, junior high and high school student spends plenty of time being lectured to by grown-ups. Right? That's happening to them all the time. You know what they're not getting anything done with? Standing shoulder to shoulder and making friends with grown-ups. And what we want to do, what I've always wanted us to do, is when they hit about 5th grade, I want them serving in a ministry. I want them coming on Sunday, serving in a ministry, doing something productive. The reasons there's just so many reasons. It attacks their selfishness, replaces it with service, and it puts them shoulder to shoulder with grown-ups. And they have grown-ups who are actually their friends. My wife and I have raised 3 amazing daughters. And I can give you 2 reasons that happened. Number 1, they've got an amazing mom. I had nothing to do with it, by the way. I was kind of like the impediment to the whole thing. Number 1, their mother is spectacularly amazing. And number 2, from the time they were this tall, they've been serving in church. They've been shoulder to shoulder with grown-ups. Some people, teenagers, are going, I don't know where my kid gets my teenager, suddenly they're this moody teenager. How'd I get a moody teenager? Who do they hang around with? Other moody teenagers. Wonder how they got moody. How they started acting like teenagers. Well, that's only people you let them associate with. This is something that a church offers that I don't know where else you can get this. But you go to a church like ours where you take your 4th, 5th, 6th grader and let them be serving in First Impression, serving in children's ministry, where they are shoulder to shoulder friends with the kind of role models you're wanting to bring into their lives. You're going all week long, boy, I wish my child had a role model, had somebody mature to rub off. We got it. I'm sorry, we're not going to put them in a classroom. We're going to put them in a life classroom where they're going to learn and grow and get the skills that actually make them good at life. I was getting ready to come out here, and one of the children's director people came up to me, and because this is the second service, and she came up to me and said, shows me a picture. She says, see this little boy here? He's special needs. It's his first Sunday here. He's a special needs kid. It's his first Sunday, and he's sitting next to a girl who's about 3 or 4 years older than he is. Who's like, she's probably 4th, 5th grade, I'm guessing. And she's working in the children's ministry. And this little boy found her relatable. He didn't find the adults that relatable, but he found that fourth, fifth grade girl, extremely relatable. So he has been working with her, and she's working with him, and he's making connections he would not make with a grown-up because there's a fifth grader. I don't know if you remember this. When you were in elementary school, who were the cool kids? The junior high ones. And when you were in junior high, who were the cool kids? High school kids. There is nothing cooler to a child in our children's ministry than a high schooler or a junior higher or even a high elementary school person who's in the room with them. So do you see why I'm a big fan of this? Do you see why? And that's that thing where you're taking away the snowplow. You're letting your kid get out there, let them do things, let them have some trials, some challenges, because working in children's ministry is challenging. But they grow into the person God designed them to be when we let them have real life. Okay, that was free too, by the way. I mentioned that, right? Okay. By the way, this trusting God thing, this living by faith. You want to know one way you can tell whether it's working? It's in verse 4. It says, then you will find favor with both God and people, and you'll earn a good reputation. If you're living by faith, if you're walking by faith, if it's a normal part of your life, and you're doing it right, people will be drawn to you. If you think you're living by faith, you're living a Christ-like life, and everybody hates you, you're doing it wrong. If everybody thinks you're a jerk, if you turn people off, if people turn away from you, you're doing the whole Christianity thing completely wrong, because Christianity means being like Christ, and when I look at Christ's life, were people attracted to him? Oh my goodness, yes. How attracted were people to Jesus? Jesus had no trouble drawing a crowd. His biggest problem was the crowd would get too big, and he'd have to teach something obnoxious to drive a few of them away. Because he was so attractive, because he lived God's principles in a humble way. Now, if you're living God's principles in a cocky way, nobody's going to like you. And by nobody, I mean nobody, not even me. I'm not going to like you. But if you're living God's principles in the humble way that God designs them to be lived, you're living by that, trusting God in everything, people will be drawn to you. Okay? Now, let's keep moving. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 7 and 8 now. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Full stop. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you'll have healing for your body and strength for your bones. So, next question. Am I maintaining humility? Am I maintaining humility? 1 Corinthians 4:7 says, what do you have that God hasn't given you? And if everything you have is from God, why boast as though it were not a gift? What are you good at? How did that happen? It's not really good at something, but I am, probably shouldn't say this out loud at my age, but I'm insanely healthy. I'm just incredibly healthy. I mean, my entire life, I've been crazy healthy. It's just, I am. I mean, I don't get sick very often. It's very rare. I've never broken a bone. And I've never had a stitch outside of when I've had minor surgery and had to put a stitch in for that kind of stuff. Partially I'm just very cautious. But I'm also I don't get sick. Now, how much credit can I take for that? Well, Steve, I bet you have an amazing diet. It's pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing. Well, you work out a lot. I work out a lot now. Basically, from 20 to 50, I specialized on being the best couch potato you could possibly imagine. Okay? My exercise consisted of going to the fridge during commercials. Okay? All right? So, I mean, there's no reason that I can take any credit for being healthy. It's just, God just decided to be, maybe because I'm such a whiner, he said, I don't want to listen to him whine, make him healthy. I don't know why. But let's say you're really smart. How much credit can you take for that? How did you get smart? Well, somebody gave you some really good smart genes, and maybe somebody gave you a good work ethic that you got from somewhere, and you ran into some good teachers along the way, and da-da-da-da-da. What did you have that God hasn't given you? What? Okay, yeah, nothing. So humility is going into the situation and saying, I don't get that much credit for all this stuff. I may be using it well, but I don't get credit for what I have. Humility says, I'm blessed, I'm happy, God's just, for some reason, being nice to me in that area. Now, as far as humility, you may need to ask somebody else whether you're being humble or not, because you may not know that you're a cocky, arrogant person. Still need some friends. But one way to tell if you're humble, if humility is part of your life, what do you do with people who are smarter than you are? What do you do with people who are better at something than you are? If you're turned off, if you're intimidated, if you chase away people who are smarter than you and better at you than something, that's a sign of a lack of humility. If you embrace and try to learn, you see somebody who's smarter than you and say, I can learn from that person, that's humility. If you say, I need to get that person out of my life because they make me look bad, that's a lack of humility. That's just simple, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, I got one more. Verses 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. Now, I know some of you want me to stress the good wine part. There's some of you who are going, could you spend about a week on that? No, we're not doing a special series on that. That's not the part what I want you to see is the first part. See, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Okay? Last question. Am I living generously? Am I living generously? Jesus put it this way in the Gospel of Luke. He said, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It will be poured out in your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And the psalmist said, good will come to the one who lends generously and conducts his business fairly. Let me, a couple things about generosity. It's not just about money. Some of you think, oh, he's going to start talking about giving money. That's cool. We never turn down money here so far. We would teach you not to play the lottery because it's a tax on people who are bad at math. Okay, but if you win the lottery and want to give us money, we're not going to get mad at you. Okay? Just as a general perspective, I'm not saying it's not about money, but generosity goes well beyond money. Okay? Generosity is about everything that God gives you. Everything that passes through your life is a chance for generosity. If God gives you money, yes, be generous with money. If God gives you talent, be generous with your talents. I know people who are a little bit generous with their money, but will never use their talents for anything beyond self-promotion. Their talents are exclusively for them to help them get ahead and become all they want to be. But they never will use their talents for anybody else. I know people who are maybe generous with money and hold on to their time like it's life. And they will never give any time away. They won't share their time with anybody. It's interesting that Jesus, as far as I can tell, was generous with all three pieces. I mean, Jesus was generous with the money that came through him. He talks about he didn't have much money because he was always just saying, I'll do this, this. And you think about it, generous. He had an ability to make money anytime he wanted to. If you can multiply bread and turn water into wine, you've got an income stream. Okay? And he never used that. He never used his talents for his own benefit. He always used his talents for the benefit of others. He used his time for one of my favorite things about looking at the life of Jesus in the Gospels is how much he was okay with being interrupted. People interrupted him constantly, and he never seemed to get upset about it. One of my favorites, Jesus is he's walking down the street. He's just walking down the street. He's going somewhere. We don't know where. Somebody comes and interrupts him and says, hey, my child is sick and needs you. Could you come heal my child? And Jesus takes the interruption, and he turns to go help that person, and he's on his way to help that person, and a woman comes along who's sick, and she grabs his robe to get to his energy, and she gets healed, and he stops and talks to her. So he has an interruption to his interruption. And he was crazily gracious to everybody along the way. That's called generosity with his time. He's generous with his time, with his talents, and with his money. And if you do that, that has a benefit you don't think about. Because if I take all of these questions we've asked, every one of them centers on one characteristic that we all have as people. We are all selfish. Every one of us is selfish. Every one of us likes to start a sentence with me or I. We like, it's about me, what makes me happy, what will benefit me. If you go back and look at the whole list, you're going to see it's all about, well, generosity strikes at the root of selfishness. It goes right to the root of selfishness and it punctures it, because that thing that you're holding on to for your own benefit, you're giving it away. And it attacks your selfishness. I would even say, and I could be wrong, that if you want to start living wisely, the best first step is generosity. I'm not doing that to get you to give money to the church. I'm saying that for your personal spiritual development, if you want to live wisely, it is very possible the step one should be add generosity to your life, because you're short-circuiting your natural selfishness. Matter of fact, let's just look. Let me just read you through what we talked about. Am I reflecting God's principles? What stops me from reflecting God's principles? A lot of times it's selfishness. I don't want to do what you say because it's hard. It's challenging. It's difficult. I want to do what's easy for me. So we're selfish. Am I living in faith? Again, am I trusting God with the day-to-day decisions? God, that's so... Can I let it be about me? Because God's principles are all about helping other people. Can I just focus on me? Am I maintaining humility? Ooh. I think that's the crown prince of selfishness, isn't it? A lack of humility. So, if you're wanting to start living, this is not what people are used to hearing. If you want to start living wisely, you ask yourself the questions: am I reflecting God's principles? Am I moving in faith? Am I maintaining humility? And am I living generously? If you want to jumpstart the process, get things moving quickly, start with generosity. Look at yourself. Say, what skills do I have? How can I use them to help others? What resources do I have? How can I use them to help others? What talents? How much time do I have? You want to go to another level? How can I change my schedule so I have time to be interrupted? That's one of the that may be, and I don't know if I'm not going to give myself too much credit for this, but a few years ago I just changed my schedule up. I just completely revamped my schedule so I've got time to be interrupted. I schedule myself in blocks. People kind of freak out. They send me a thing saying, "Hey, Pastor Steve, our marriage is in real trouble. Could we meet with you?" And they're always expecting me to say I'm too busy, and I say, "Yeah, I can." Because I've scheduled my life. I've arranged my life so I can afford to be interrupted. Now, not constantly. I do have things to do. But if 1, 2, 3 people a week interrupt me, that's fine. I do a lot of work at a coffee shop. I do so much work at a coffee shop, they just know me. I've got my table, everything. And one of the reasons I do the work at a coffee shop, because I can get interrupted. There are probably some people in this room go, "Yeah, I've done that. I've come in the coffee shop, Steve was sitting there, I stopped and talked to him for 15 minutes. By design. That's me trying to learn to be generous with my time, which is really hard to do. Okay? So reschedule your budget, reschedule your time, reschedule how you use your abilities and your strengths and your passions so that you're generous, so that you're giving them away. That will give you a huge jump start on living wisely. Okay? Now, of course, the ultimate wisdom is to reflect what God wants to do. And like I said, these principles, they work whether you're a Christian or not. It's just the way God designed the universe. That's how it works. But they work best if you have a life that is fully committed to God. If it's not some part-time thing that you do, if it's not just one of the pieces you put into the recipe of your life. If your life centers around God, if your life centers around Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ did to you by coming into the world to die for our sins and to restore that relationship with him, that's the best thing you can do to start living the wise life God wants you to live. And if you don't have that relationship with Christ, what we ask you to do during the end of the service is to grab one of these blue bags. And if you grab a blue bag, somebody that's trained will connect you with them. They'll spend about 10 minutes, walk you through the contents of the bag, show you how to have a relationship with Christ. This is I just got to tell you this. It's one of the coolest things. I got a message last night on Facebook Messenger for somebody who used to go to church here. He's now stationed in Tennessee, Campbell, which is both. And he said, I'm going to be in the area. He was actually at a concert in Rockingham. Would it be possible for me to come to the first service and afterwards for you to unpack a blue bag with me? That's pretty sweet. Because this is what we're pushing for as your biggest, bestest step, is establishing that relationship with Christ. If you don't have that relationship with Christ, like I said, grab the blue bag. We'll get you moving in the right direction toward the ultimate in wisdom. If you have accepted Christ, the next step obviously is baptism. We talk about that every week. That's that ceremony where we have people immersed in water and announce that they're followers of Christ. Also, if you want to start moving toward that living in wisdom on a daily basis, we have our step classes. Tonight's is excellent for getting you moving in that direction because it's the step class on how to develop the habits in your life. Pastor Barry teaches that one. It'll be in the Steel Fortress on the other side of the tent building at 6 o'clock. Just show up, okay? Also, there may be something that we've discussed today that you want to pray about, or just something in your heart you want to pray about. We've got a cross in the corner. That's just there, so during this next song, if you want to pray about anything, you just walk over there and pray. No one's going to bother you. No one's going to interfere with you. But if you want to pray with somebody, Joyce would just love to pray with you, wouldn't you, Joyce? And if there's anything in your life, and over here too, and they just love to pray with you. If there's something in your life, you just would like somebody else's voice going up to God for you, during the next song, walk up to and say, hey, would you pray with me? And they'll be ecstatically happy to do it, and it's perfectly confidential. They're not going to report back to us and say, guess what they're praying about? It's just between you and that person, totally confidential. Chance that somebody else pray for you and with you. We also have communion stations. We have one here up front and one in the back, so you can remind yourself of what Christ has done for you during this next song if you'd like to do that. Let me go back to end. Let me go back to those two verses we read at the very beginning. It says, wisdom will guide you down delightful paths. All her ways are satisfying. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly. You've really got two choices when it comes to making your day-to-day decisions. You can keep doing them selfishly. You can keep doing them the way you think is best, and you can live away from and against God's principles. You can do that. Nobody's going to stop you. But if you will trust God with the little decisions, the little day-to-day decisions, it says he will make your path straight. And I think a straight path in this crooked world is definitely something worth pursuing.